we sort of take for granted that we've got a good connection, that technology works when we need it. So just adding another difficulty in getting those experiences in place, even though we're becoming so much more flexible with online learning and online interaction. There's still challenges to overcome despite how far we've come. But yeah, it's just very interesting to see, as is the nature of this sort of topic, international and foreign perspectives. So that's, very good.
Okay, so thank you, William. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat room. So at the University of Queensland, as I was saying, we had a number of opportunities for our students to travel to undertake the placements in, they were supposed to be in Thailand and in Hong Kong and in Malaysia. And when the pandemic hit, for us as university lecturers, we had to think about whether or not we could really provide to our students an experience that was equivalent to going and working within those organisations in those countries, or provided at least a valuable learning experience for them. It would never be equivalent, but it may be just as worthwhile in different ways. So thankfully, we worked with 3 really excellent organisations who were prepared to give it a go, to see what we could do on a virtual level. And so we had to set about thinking about the learning outcomes for our students. And one of the important aspects of having students undertake placements in other countries and in organisations in other places is the cultural experience that they will get, as well as their understanding of a justice system in another country. And can you actually get that same sort of immersive experience when you are not able to travel to the country? We did have to rely on, obviously on technology, and we had to rely on our organisations being prepared to distribute work to students, to also try and engage them in some cultural activities, and to ensure that the placement experience was fulfilling. A couple of the things that we noticed that were really interesting were that we actually received more applications from students to undertake a virtual placement than we did when we have offered placements for people to travel overseas. And one of the reasons for that was that travelling overseas, even with the assistance of a government grant, is very expensive for students, and it also can take up quite a bit of time for them in terms of the travel and the staying. So it actually meant that some students who may not have been able to afford to travel overseas were able to participate in an international real life work or real work experience. And secondly, we noticed, and maybe the students can comment on this, but I hadn't thrown this to them beforehand, we noticed that because during the pandemic, our students were quite isolated and often having to work from home or undertaking their studies online, the opportunity to come together and to work with an organisation and engage with both supervisors and the organisations and their other students, their peers, meant that they were able to have a worthwhile connection during that time that was otherwise quite isolating. So I think that that was a great experience for students as well. So I'm just checking the time now. We were going to have a little break, but we might move straight into talking about how the online experience worked for our students, because then we can come back to any questions at the end. So I'm going to start with Mark and Sylvia, who are going to tell us about their experience in undertaking placements with Babsicle in a virtual sense. So if we could share the screen, please, back to the PowerPoints.
Okay. All right, so I guess I'll be starting. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Klein. I'm a student here at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, and me and my fellow presenters and I will be sharing with you some of our personal insights and experiences we had during our virtual student placements with hosts overseas. So at least for me, I enrolled to broaden my understanding of the law in a global context, as I feel like we need to work together towards common goals, such as addressing climate change, pandemics like COVID, and, especially addressing the legal barriers and obstacles to justice that cause disadvantage. So today I'll be talking about three things about my experience with Babsicle in Thailand and Chiang Mai, and how I think they helped with student learning in a virtual placement. So if I could just go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you so much. So today I'll be talking about three things about my experience with Babsicle in Thailand. The first one is how Babsicle communicated in the virtual platform with students. And the second point was about the extracurricular activities that we were able to participate in. And as well, I'll talk a little bit about the assessment that we had to complete and the importance of student collaboration in that context. So if I'll just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about what it was like having the hosts in Babsicle talk with us online for most of the time. So I originally planned to go to Babsicle in the middle of 2020, but obviously the pandemic kind of ruined that for me. So our university and our hosts, Babsicle, were able to arrange between December 2020 to February 2021 to have it conducted virtually and mainly over Zoom, which I think everyone knows about now. So basically what that looked like was every week, the students that enrolled would come into university here in Brisbane, and together we would use Zoom on our laptops in a classroom together. And we would be able to talk with the hosts about our tasks, but we also talked about, we also had seminars about Thailand, what it was like there in terms of culture, the people, and what Babsicle does. Our hosts, Wendy and Bruce, I think Wendy is here with us today, also took many photos of their activities and showed us in real time where they were. They were walking down the streets, for example, in Chiang Mai, showing us their classes, who they were meeting. They were showing us nearly everything about Babsicle. So, I thought that was really great. The hosts adapted to virtual learning in such a dynamic way. They kept us updated and engaging with us all the time and showing us what they were doing. And I think it kept us really engaged and listened to, because they were always constantly talking with us, and I felt very much listened to whenever I had an issue or they were having a problem with my tasks. That constant ongoing communication and them sharing so much information and sharing so many images of Thailand and Laos, for example, really bridged a gap, I think, and it was a really great alternative to the real thing, I think. So yeah, that ongoing communication, the ongoing connection to the place in Thailand, I think that was super important for all of us to stay engaged. So that was one point that I'd like to talk about. So I'll just go to the next slide, please. That's all right. Yeah, so, but in saying that, obviously, I think we couldn't recreate Thailand, and much of the real life experience over a laptop, for example. So in that case, as Mandy explained, our hosts and our university organized these cultural activities here in Brisbane to substitute the sort of activities that we would have been doing overseas in Thailand. So the first activity I want to talk about is the cooking class, the virtual cooking class that we all did. So they gave us a list of ingredients that we can get here, and we all got together in our homes, in our kitchens, and over Zoom on our laptop, we were cooking together, and they were teaching us how to make pad thai. And I just thought that was amazing. And if you see the picture on the screen, that pad thai bowl, that's the result of that that's what happened to with my pad thai. It was really good too. So thank you so much, Wendy, and the team at Babsicle. It was delicious. But the other activity that we were able to organize was to a Buddhist temple in the Gold Coast. Most of the pictures on my slide show that. So it's about an hour away from Brisbane. There's a very large Thai Southeast Asian community in Queensland, and they built this temple some years ago. So Mandy and our university organized that to be a substitute for something similar that we would have done in Chiang Mai. So in the temple, we weren't just eating, we were taking part in the festival. We were serving guests, we were packing up, we were helping the people there. So all of this felt very special. I think it really made the placement extra engaging. So I think that these things like cultural activities can really keep students engaged, and also because they're cultural activities, giving us a better idea about the culture and about the attitudes that people might have overseas about the law and about access to justice. So it's really important, I think, these extracurricular activities that aren't just to do with justice or the law, but also bring us into their connection with the culture. So in saying that, I'd like to go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the student projects that we did. So in my placement, there was a group activity where most of the students had to work on a pre-mock trial kit. So that involved creating a fictional scenario where students had to create fictional laws based on the laws we have in Australia, and somehow apply that to a fictional story. And we did that so that future legal students could debate over it to practice their skills and their knowledge. I found this task very challenging personally. I think in terms of harmonizing the facts and putting these fictional laws together. But it was also easy in a sense because we had so many students working on it. They were bringing their ideas into the project and having all these, we were all talking to each other about it. So in my opinion, the task wasn't too difficult because of the collaborative spirit. So it also helped us hone our skills with cooperation as well. So I think for NGOs, having several students work together, even in a virtual context, is super important. It keeps us engaged. It develops our cooperation, and yeah, it was that was very positive in my opinion. There was also another thing that we had to do. We also had a personal assignment or a research assessment. Mine was about sustainability of pro bono in Thailand, in small law firms. And I think Sylvia did the same thing. So that was very interesting. The hosts, Wendy and Bruce, were very attentive to me. Bruce introduced me to different lawyers in Thailand and even in Singapore and in Manila, for example. And I was able to talk to many different people about this subject. And I learned a great deal about, the differences of pro bono in Australia and in Thailand. It really opened my eyes, but I wouldn't have been able to do that without such strong connection and help from my hosts. They were always so attentive. So I really commend Babsicle for being so attentive in this context. So I'll just move on to the last slide, please, if that's all right. So yeah, no, I learned a great deal on my placement. It broadened my view of law, how it works in other countries, the challenges to access to justice. It also gave me insight into how law can be taught and communicated in a virtual placement. It also honed into the fact that, you know, cultural activity is super important for so many reasons. And yeah, collaboration and student collaboration is also a very big deal and very important to do for if NGOs want to host students. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope I didn't go over time, but that's what I got. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Mark. Thank you for sharing that experience and all those great photos. We might move to Sylvia, who was also at Babsicle. Were you in the, might have been a different year?
No, so we found out that I actually was also in the 2020 Christmas break Babsicle year with Mark. So mine is a little bit shorter because you don't want to double up too much. But yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sylvia. And as I said, I also joined Mark in the clinical placement with Babsicle over the 2020 Christmas break. And for those who aren't already aware, Babsicle are a non-profit community legal organisation focused on access to justice and justice education. So they provide both clinical education and English training to law students throughout Asia. I don't think the PowerPoint's being shared now, is it? I might get this.
Could we please share it, Secretariat?
The slide that you're on is perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So as Mark briefly touched on, Babsicle also hold an annual mock trial event for students, which is a collaborative learning exercise focused on present-day legal issues and social justice outcomes. Leading up, the organisation holds national trainings in a few South Asian countries. So when the global pandemic hit, it would have been very easy to forego the mock trial event, but Babsicle rolled up their sleeves and decided that the student trainings and the final event were too important to skip. Of course, everything in 2020 needed to be done virtually. So for our placement, all the way from Brisbane, we worked closely with Babsicle's Thailand team to develop the mock trial packet that included a detailed factual scenario, 6 witness statements, written evidence, and laws and regulations from the fictitious country of Zaltana. And so using Babsicle's style of collaborative and interactive teaching, we helped to develop the case materials and learning resources for the 2021 Virtual Asia Regional Mock Trial event. So on the slide there, you kind of see it on the side, which are just screenshots from the event itself. In preparation for the event, Babsicle also facilitated a number of national and regional workshops for students from several countries throughout Asia to get familiar with the materials and ultimately to improve their legal skills and strengthen their appreciation of fair trial, access to justice, and rule of law principles. The projects that Babsicle undertake are so important to the long-term health of justice systems around the world. The students that they teach are highly motivated, and some will no doubt be future leaders within their countries' bar associations or even political leaders. So being part of that work was a real privilege. I'll just go to the next slide if it's okay. Thank you. So as Australian law students, it was a fantastic opportunity to learn about what access to justice means in different cultures. And at the same time, from a professional standpoint, we were testing our flexibility and our ability to adapt to the virtual work environment, which is a very different environment than working face-to-face. But of course, the flexibility afforded by a virtual internship is not without responsibility. We still needed to report to our Babsicle hosts, meet project deadlines, collaborate with others, and remain productive while working independently. We had to master the art of conversation and negotiation digitally, bearing in mind the time difference between us and the Thailand team. So we used WhatsApp and Zoom as part. And I think learning to write and appear professional in these mediums is an invaluable professional skill. So I gained confidence with presenting information and asking questions on our weekly Zoom calls, which we used to brainstorm ideas and practice the case materials. And I also practiced my ability to sound professional when instant messaging via WhatsApp or even sounding professional in an email. So I think virtual externships are a great way to learn to use innovation and technology to drive social change. As university students, we were developing self-discipline, time management, patience, resourcefulness, and proactiveness, all while making a positive difference by supporting a global nonprofit. And so these skills and values have really become the foundation of my work ethic since our placement. And I'll do the next slide, please. While coordinating and planning with a large group of people from all over the world can sometimes seem challenging or daunting, when you manage to achieve your goal efficiently, it can be very satisfying. And for us, the placement was still a very interconnected experience. As Mark mentioned, our hosts and the university organised so many incredible cultural activities. The pad thai cooking class over Zoom was also a highlight for me, but I must admit I'm not the greatest cook. So the photo on that slide is actually one that another student sent in our WhatsApp group. I thought I'd use because mine wasn't as aesthetic. But yeah, we also participated in the global pro bono movement's Run for Justice at the same time as our hosts in Chiang Mai, which is very cool. We were sending photos to and from each other of our different sceneries. So I guess it goes without saying that some of the bonus benefits of a virtual externship include broadening your global perspective and ability to collaborate with international teams and professionals. I think a remote internship gives you a platform to interact and connect with people from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds. You get the chance to learn more about their values and how their background impacts their work ethic, and perhaps even apply some of them to your own operating rhythm. So we developed high-level intercultural communication and teamwork skills while gaining a first-hand appreciation of the complexities of addressing access to justice needs. So that sort of concludes me. That works. I think, who was next? Is it Will or Kirsty's next?
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Again, a great overview of what you did during a virtual placement. And we'll move now to Kirsty. Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. So my name's Kirsty McCruvey, and I actually recently graduated from the University of Queensland. And here I studied a law honours degree and a Bachelor of Arts with an extended major in international relations. And I enrolled in the virtual course, which was called Transnational Perspectives in Law. And that was for the Australian summer semester, which goes from November 2020 and it went to January 2021. So as part of the course, I worked with a company called Future Law, who are based in Sabah, Malaysia. And apart from this virtual course being an incredible student experience, which included cross-jurisdictional and practical learning, for me, it was also a life-changing experience, professionally and personally. It really reinforced my choice to study law. It reignited my passion for law as a tool for empowering positive change. And it did help me to recognise where I fit in the law and that I did actually have a place in the law and in the legal profession. If I can go to the next slide and the one after, sorry, slide 3, please. Thank you. So by November 2020, which was the start of the summer semester, the student body at UQ had already experienced about 9 months worth of virtual learning. So it meant that the transition to virtual learning with Future Law in Malaysia was relatively seamless. It was made easier with the guidance and support of Mandy, who you've all met, who was our course coordinator, as she was, and also the well-structured program, which was designed by Harry Jonas from Future Law. So the advantage of the virtual program, which Mandy has already touched on, was that a larger cohort of students were able to participate in the course. So with Future Law, including me, we had 11 students that were enrolled. It was also more affordable as we only needed to cover the cost of the course, and that was paid through the government grant Mandy spoke of, the New Colombo Mobility Grant. So for me, if the course was offered in person in Malaysia, I would not have been able to enroll due to work and family commitments. So the virtual structure gave me the opportunity to study over the summer semester. So in terms of how it worked, from Monday, December 14, 2020, to about Thursday, the 11th of February in 2021, the student group, we'd meet twice a week in a seminar room at UQ, where we'd connect with Harry Jonas from Future Law via Zoom. So whilst at uni, UQ really ensured that measures were put in place to keep us COVID safe, which obviously highlighted another benefit of virtual learning, which was that where we weren't traveling during the pandemic, which meant that we were able to stay safe and healthy during the learning period. So Harry set the group's core readings, which we all did independently. Then we came back together to discuss the readings and key concepts as a group. The majority of UQ students were in the seminar room and did that in person, and with Harry and a couple of other students online. So the seminars were very interactive, and everyone was supported and encouraged to talk and share their perspectives, which we all did. Obviously, a benefit of travelling overseas together would have been that the students could have learned more about each other outside of just being students at UQ. But to make up for that lost experience, Harry designed activities which enabled us to learn about each other and ourselves outside our role as students. And we did those activities at the beginning of the course, during the course, and also at the end of it. So the format for learning and assessment also encouraged active engagement with each other. There was an element of independent work, but otherwise the student group really worked collaboratively. So in Australia, we are a lot more independent in our learning and, to be honest, rarely collaborate, specifically at uni. So we all really enjoyed the experience of working together and learning from each other, and also supporting students who might have needed guidance. So Harry was based in Sabah and in Malaysia whilst he taught the course, and throughout he was able to provide really practical and personal examples and stories that aligned to the subject matter we were learning and researching. So he shared details of his practical work with the local Indigenous peoples of Sabah, and he was also able to share their stories and diverse lived experiences, which gave our theoretical research and readings a level of humanity which is often missing in standard law subjects at uni. So if I could go to slide 5, please. Just the next one, please. Thank you. So as we've sort of already talked about, Mandy organised cultural experiences for our group from Future Law, and with Babsicle, so Mark and Sylvia, who you've already heard from. And it was a real pleasure being able to participate in the cultural activities with the team for Babsicle, as it gave us all a chance to share our learning experiences with each other. It also increased student connections that we made as the two groups were brought together by more than just the university subject through these cultural experiences. And those connections have really continued ever since that course. So as Mark shared, we visited the Buddhist temple where we volunteered for the day, and we were absolutely blessed with tables full of incredible food to enjoy, as you would have seen, and the kindness of all of the people that we met during the visit. We participated in the Run for Justice, or for me, the Walk for Justice, which was about 5 Ks around the grounds of UQ. And at the end of the course, the Future Law and Babsicle groups came back together for a final dinner and to reflect on our cross-jurisdictional and cultural learning. So if I can go to the next slide, please, and then the next one, sorry. So for our Future Law group, we had a major research project that we worked on over the 7 weeks of the course. And the paper was not just for assessment, it was actually based on real-world needs of our host, Future Law. So to respond to it, we broke into smaller groups to tackle different areas of the research topic. However, we did keep coming back together as a cohort to share our individual learnings with each other. So this was done in person during the seminars, or we would connect via Facebook Messenger and through a shared Google document. And at the end of the course, we provided Future Law with an 8,000-word group research paper, and that was published on their Future Law website. So the title, as it says on the slide, of the research paper was Contested Conservation, an exploration of the legal and political ecology of biodiversity conservation and sustainable use in Sabah, Malaysia. And everything that we did throughout the course really all came back to that topic. So the subject matter of the research project and the course in general involved environmental law in Malaysia generally and the impact of environmental protection initiatives on Sabah's Indigenous peoples more specifically. So from an outsider, it seemed like the environmental protection initiatives that were being implemented by the government were very positive in terms of protecting the environment and biodiversity in Sabah. However, through future law, when we investigated it through the lens of political and legal ecology, we found that the initiatives were in fact detrimentally affecting the lives, way of life and futures of Indigenous groups who were living in areas which had been marked for environmental protection. And additionally, and this is similar to what we experience in Australia, is that the Indigenous groups who were living in those areas, who had intergenerational, in-depth and extensive knowledge about the specific ecosystems, they weren't consulted in the design of environmental protection and regeneration programs. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So the group research project was then used as the basis for designing our individual research essays for assessment. So I was particularly affected and have been ever since in a really positive way by the concept of political and legal ecology, which I didn't know about before this course. So I used it to talk about the relationship between the need to preserve cultural diversity, particularly in areas like Sabah, and the need to protect the environment and biodiversity. So if I could go 2 slides ahead to discovery, please. Thank you. So in terms of assessment, our first assessment piece was a personal reflection, which was based on our understanding of culture generally and also our unconscious cultural bias. So it was a really interesting introspective assessment task, which was made even more important given we were remaining in Australia, yet we were dealing solely with the experiences of a completely different culture. Our last piece of assessment, which was in addition to that research essay, was a final reflection that asked us to consider how the virtual placement had influenced our understanding of the law and justice, with particular reference to Malaysia. So as I mentioned, I particularly enjoyed the final assessment because of the concept of legal and political ecology. So it had really given me permission to interrogate the law and its relationship with vulnerable and marginalised people in society here in Australia and Malaysia, and as I've experienced around the world. So that one concept really reignited my passion for the law and reminded me why I'd come to university later in life to study law. And it really cemented my investment in terms of time and future in social justice. And I may not have had that experience or be in the place I am now, personally and professionally, if I hadn't had the opportunity to participate in this course. So the option to do a course virtually gave me that opportunity, which is why I'm such an advocate for virtual learning experiences, whether it's for uni students or for professionals generally. If I can go to the last slide, please. So just to conclude, the main things that I learned in completing this virtual experience were that the effects of law are multidimensional, and even if a law seems to be doing good, for example, if it's enforcing environmental protection, a look beneath the surface at its actual effects may tell a different story. I did also learn that the lived experience of people impacted by the law are important when interrogating it, and this may have been one thing that was lacking in the virtual experience. So during the summer semester, we were able to hear from Harry Jonas, and that's a picture of him in Sabah, about his and other people's experiences. However, I admit it would have been would have meant a lot more to be able to speak to Indigenous people from Sabah and hear from them directly about their culture and, of course, the effects of the environmental protection regulations on their lives and their culture. But in saying that, and something that we discussed with Harry, is that it could be overcome by inviting guest speakers to talk to students over Zoom or other video conference options where they can then engage and ask those sorts of questions. So I also learned that we can really create truly meaningful and memorable connections with people, even when we are connecting with them virtually. That virtual learning opportunities gives more students access to international cross-jurisdictional education, which I think makes for more well-rounded students. And finally, that the benefits we all gain through this course, Transnational Perspectives in Law at UQ, were absolutely not diminished at all by the course being virtual. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kirsty. That was really great overview of your time in Saba. And, you know, it's particularly gratifying as your course coordinator to hear that it has had such a transformative effect on you, because I think we all know that clinical legal education experiences and international experiences in not-for-profit organisations do have that effect. So when we were transferring that to a virtual experience, we weren't sure if it would translate, but it's great to hear that it did. So thank you very much, Kirsty. And we'll finish with William, who undertook his placement with an organisation in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Mandy. If we just stay on this slide. So my name is William Simons. I'm a third-year law student at the University of Queensland. In December of 2021 and into 2022, I undertook a virtual clinical placement with Justice Centre Hong Kong, a non-profit, non-governmental legal centre supporting non-refoulement claims in Hong Kong for refugees. Non-refoulement protection is the prevention of returning a person to a country where they would face persecution upon their return. 12,800 such people seek protection in Hong Kong, fleeing war, torture, persecution, and other serious human rights violations. To this end, Hong Kong Justice Centre assists refugees in progressing through the universal screening mechanism, a process conducted by the Immigration Department to determine eligibility for a visa on non-refoulement grounds. The journey is long, technical, and often marred by an absence of support, administrative mistakes, and limited avenues of appeal. Of 28,359 applicants processed by the start of 2022, a mere 272 had been accepted at first instance. That's less than 1% of all applicants. Where an applicant is refused, and obviously it's quite common, Hong Kong Justice Centre briefs advocates on the grounds of judicial review, often appealing those first instance decisions. Further, Hong Kong Justice Centre assists refugees in connecting them with support, food, housing, interpretation and translation, mental health and legal services connected with their application. Justice Centre clearly provide a vital service in advocating for refugee rights against this backdrop of indifference and uncertainty. If we can move to the next slide, if we can keep on that slide, please, engagement at home. So, like everyone in this conference and evidenced by attendance over Zoom, we've adapted to the changing world. Our placement was conducted over Zoom, Teams, and collaborative workspaces. Despite the distance and there's no overcoming it, we still felt a sense of collective spirit working towards a common goal before us. And while having a mere ocean between us and Hong Kong, it didn't stop us working in in-person groups, however. We attended lessons virtually, but in the same room. We'd have team meetups at university, and towards the end, we did the global walk, or for some of us, run for justice, and rounded out the experience with a dinner as a collective. We discussed our various experiences, realizations, and new commitments to justice and pro bono work. Other presenters today have talked about the virtual experience and how it is just as, well, perhaps not just as good, but still good at being transformative. So I'd like to go into how Hong Kong Justice Centre specifically was transformative for me. So an aspect of Hong Kong Justice Centre's commitment to refugee and human rights law is their education services. Taught by their legal staff as well as other members of their organisation, we were educated on both theory and practice. The first 2 weeks of our placement were spent learning or being refreshed on the international human rights framework, the development of Hong Kong asylum law, grounds of non-refoulement protection, the procedure of the USM, and more general topics corresponding to the issue. Armed with this theory, we thought we were ready to make a start on some change. We were passionate, make no mistake, perhaps a bit premature, as with all theoretical education, its practical application is anything but straightforward. This is where Hong Kong Justice Centre really shone. Their legal team began to give us practical training, with the theory as the necessary context. We were taught how to interview clients with backgrounds filled with unbelievable hardship, to be sensitive in our inquiries whilst also progressing their claims, how to work through the evidence provided to corroborate testimony. We were also taught how to conduct the necessary country of origin research to demonstrate the threat of persecution they fled, and how to draft this all together into a workable brief. Every step of the way, we received tangible, applicable experience and practice-based education. Now we're no longer merely informed as to the issues, we're educated on making a meaningful difference and change. With this education conducted and now done, the remaining 5 weeks or so were spent assisting the legal staff with their projects and work. There were two prongs, if you will, to our work. Firstly, there were practice groups who had been divided up from the cohort to work with the various legal officers. And secondly, there was more overarching project work, which again, we had been split up to progress in various ways. My practice group was assigned to further a client claim. Under the guidance of our legal officer, we completed the Justice Centre Hong Kong screening tool, a process which is designed to develop a history of the client, ascertain the grounds upon which their claim may be based, identify any outstanding or particularly sensitive areas of consideration, and generally holistically evaluate the client against the services that Justice Centre can provide, the ways in which those services can further the client. My primary contribution was the corroboration of witness testimony and the testimony of his client and his family, which in doing so would create a foundation upon which a claim could be established. This is where the benefit of the training really became apparent. We had the independence, the confidence, and the capacity to do such things. Aside from a daily check-in via Zoom with the case officer, we're allowed to progress the matters as a group, and importantly, as peers. I was afforded the opportunity to interview the client myself to clarify his statement and further the corroboration. By the end of the 5 weeks or so, we had developed the client's claim almost completely. And for those few weeks, we're not just students, but equals with the capacity to further the claims and assist the legal officers. And we proudly and passionately did just that. If I can move on to the next slide. And the one after that, sorry, should have. So the second part of the work was a research project. As a team, we're given previous clients of Hong Kong Justice Centre to interview to develop a body of first-hand research and statements about the quality of the Hong Kong process. This research will be presented to government and key stakeholders to advocate change in the area. By interviewing the clients ourselves, we saw the impact of the law we'd just been educated upon right in front of us. The ways in which it can be twisted where such processes are allowed, and the true human cost that a judgment can have. And this sort of leads into my next point, which is my overarching observation and why, virtual or otherwise, these placements are fundamental to developing a more holistic approach to the law. So if we can just move to the next slide. So where I place the most value in the experience and the reason why I'd urge every student who can seize it to do so is the way in which international placements afford a new perspective in law, which can then be used as a lens for change. It's very easy to presume that the law around the world is like our own domestic system, where we consider the same rights and principles to be paramount, and that there are institutions and mechanisms in place to preserve those rights. And yes, that's perhaps naive, but for me at least, it was not until I found myself in an unfamiliar system with different practices that we find just how wrong this presumption is, how different rights are protected in foreign jurisdictions and others are abrogated, how some people are supported and others are left behind, and how the law has the potential to be the source for overwhelming good or immense injustice. This is how I propose that a lens can be used, that we take this foreign experience and apply it to our own domestic legal systems. By way of a comparative analysis, we can see that the areas that our legal systems and the principles for which they stand fall short of other jurisdictions. The areas we protect properly, the areas that we take for granted, and the ways that the law that can be used to subjugate if it's allowed to, the consequences of abetting such injustice, and most importantly, the areas that must be improved upon for the universal good. Until this experience, concepts like natural justice, the rule of law, equality before the court, universal representation, and a legal system in some ways capable of compassion were of course remarkable, but I did not necessarily believe it to be unique. Of course, in every jurisdiction, there are areas of law that must advance and must be improved. In Australia, this is certainly the case, and we must be held accountable for these changes. But that should not detract from the additional necessity of defending the good that we do have. And I suggest that it's not until you have experienced a foreign perspective that these areas become totally clear. This is the value I place on the experience, the passion it invokes in those who undertake it to protect the good in our respective systems, to learn from those abroad and to take those lessons and improve the areas in which we fall short. Transnational perspectives and placements, virtual or otherwise, they're not just an experience, but a call to action to stand up for the common good and to push ever forwards as one. For that's what the legal system needs to be. One collective pushing for the same principles at the same time to really make a tangible change. Thank you. I'll now pass it back to Matt.
Thank you so much, William. Look, all I can say is that my students make me incredibly proud, and that they have all done such a wonderful job in sharing their experiences and their insights, and also taking us into reflection that is truly personal. I hope that you got as much out of that as I did sitting back and listening to them as well. So we just wanted to end now with any questions that you may have about running a virtual placement. We've talked about what it meant for the students and how we tried to encourage some cultural activities. But if you wanted any more information about the practical elements of that as well, I can certainly share them. So do we have any questions? You can put them in the chat room if that is easier. Pavina.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your experience with your placements in whether physical or virtual. I would say it's very great to hear from you guys what's going on. And I have questions, especially with some of you, especially Mark, related to, I know that you've been doing virtual placement, but however, the interesting part that you that come from your sharing experience is you've been visiting some of the place like the temple in Queensland itself. I would say this is very well organized. I can say that because even though that you're not able to travel whatsoever, you still try to find place, especially the communities is actually based in Queensland itself, and like you try to connect it, and this is actually the real social justice. And I would like to hear more after you've been visited. It's just not like you're going there not just go there for the cultures sharing experience or see what is going on, but you actually meet all the people, the Australian. I would say most of them hold the Australian nationality, but however, their background is from Asian, from Thailand, Laos, and other Asian countries. I would say this is a very good thing to do and really connect up with the communities in itself, especially in Queensland. I would like to hear more of, after you visit there, is there any other things that been communicating or how to say, the sharing information on how they connect up. Because sometimes many of these, I was gonna say they're not marginalized. However, sometimes there might be vulnerable people, especially even they're living in Australia or since birth. So I would like to hear a little bit more on this. Thank you.
I'll hand over to the students in a moment, Pavina, but I just might elaborate a little bit more on that trip, so on that activity. So I got in contact with a woman who is closely involved. She's a Thai woman herself with that community down at outside of Brisbane, where the students all live, and she helped us organise for the students and I to go for the day and volunteer at the temple. So once a month, the temple has an open day where they invite people from anywhere in the area to come and join them, and they cook all the food, and the food is shared firstly with the monks and then with all the people who attend. So you can come from anywhere, and it's a very open and welcoming community. It only happens there once a month. And as I said, we volunteered for that day, and the temple, publicly announced and thanked the students for being there. I'm not sure if they have been able to have any further engagement, but I would say that we had to travel, about an hour or so to get to the temple, because it wasn't in Brisbane where they live, and in fact, they don't have anything similar at the smaller temples in Brisbane. But I'll hand over to the students who attended that, which I think is Mark and Kirsty. Sylvia, were you there as well on that day? I can't remember. No, but Mark and Kirsty, whether or not there's been any further engagement.
So, well, yes and no. I think no, in terms of I didn't really unfortunately we didn't talk about anything legal or anything to do with social justice when we were there at the temple. But in terms of engagement with, for example, the communities of Southeast Asia in Brisbane and in Southeast Queensland broadly, I think it definitely opened my eyes a bit more to the attitudes and how people from Laos or Thailand or Cambodia, for example, how they might respond to justice matters, particularly when they're here in Brisbane and in Australia. For example, in my work and some of the volunteering I do around Brisbane, I'm often connecting with people from Southeast Asia, and I'm Filipino Australian myself. So yeah, it's been really interesting, that experience in terms of getting more understanding of where they come from and where their attitudes lie, and thus how that influences them in the law. I think I always think about, for example, this placement that I've had with Babsicle, because it gave me a new perspective of talking to these communities in Brisbane and how they feel when, for example, they have issues with the law, because there are many who do. So no, it was very good, I think, in that sense. Yeah.
Kirsty, did you want to add anything?
Oh, just that the experience and doing the cultural activities inspired me to learn more about beyond myself and beyond just the Australian territory. So I've done a lot of volunteering after the Future Law placement to learn more about different cultural groups around Brisbane. I've looked more into doing projects based on international law. I volunteer with the Red Cross now, where I try and actually have access to different cultural groups. We do speaking engagements on international law and refugee law, for example, with those different community groups. And I enrolled again in the same subject, not because I failed the first one, I did well, but we were allowed to enroll in the summer semester and the same course because it was with a different provider. And I did the Hong Kong Justice Centre placement with William in the following summer semester, because it had such an impact.
Thank you. Pavenia, any other questions? Wendy, are you wanting to say something? Not sure what those little symbols are.
I have a special guest.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hi, Bruce.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, I had to do a session on large law firm collaboration, so I apologize that I wasn't able to be on this, but I heard it went well.
Yeah, it was really, the students have done an outstanding job in presenting their experience. So yeah, thank you very much. And it's on 5:30 now, and I'm sure 5:30. What time is it for you? It's 2:30.
Yeah.
It's
yeah, we got
afternoon.
one more session to go, so we're good. So okay,
yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay, well, we'll pass on our thanks now to everyone for attending. We wish you all the best with the rest of the conference, and it's a lot. It's later in the evening here, but we've had a great time, and yeah, I'll be popping into some more sessions. And thanks again to the students. It was my last day, and this is actually my last official activity with
Wonderful to end on that
University of
note.
Queensland.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm really pleased to have been able to do it with colleagues over there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
And Mandy
you.
and Bruce.
You guys are great. Thank you for giving such good kudos to Babsicle. We didn't know we were that open and clear. We were like, ah. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your help with the slides and taking us through the presentation.
Thank you.
Right.
Men ชื่อว่า men ตัวใดแท้ตัวเมื่อกี้นี่บอกหรือว่าตัวใหม่นี่เนาะ